Welcome to The Explainer. You know, Elon Musk's ambitions are pretty legendary, right? We're talking colonizing Mars, rewiring the human brain. But what's the actual blueprint behind all of it? Well, today we're going to distill hours and hours of his latest, really in-depth interviews to get to the bottom of the core principles that are driving his vision for our future.
So Musk sees this exact moment in history as a pivotal turning point. He calls it an intelligence big bang. And, to really understand where he thinks all this is headed, we've got to first look at the unique mental toolkit he uses to build, well, everything.
Okay, so before we jump into the what, the missions, the companies, we really have to understand the how. And right at the very heart of Musk's entire approach is this one specific problem-solving method that he actually picked up from studying physics. He's called this his superpower. And it's this method he got from physics. The core idea? It's actually pretty simple. You just ignore how things have always been done. Instead, you break a problem all the way down to its most fundamental truths, what he calls the axioms. And then you ask this really powerful question. From a pure physics perspective, what is actually possible here?
And this really gets to the fundamental difference in how he thinks. See, most people, and most companies, they reason by analogy. They'll say, okay, a new rocket is probably going to cost about the same as the last one. But Musk just completely rejects that. He says it's a trap, one that only ever leads to tiny, incremental improvements. So he starts by asking a totally different question. So when he applied this exact method to rockets, he had this huge breakthrough. He literally went and calculated the cost of a rocket's raw materials on the open market. The aluminum, the copper, all that stuff. And what did he find? It made up only about 2% of the final price tag. So the real cost wasn't the materials at all. It was the incredibly inefficient way they were being put together. That one insight, it revealed this massive, massive opportunity. And it's basically the foundation of how SpaceX operates today. Okay, so that's the how. That's the blueprint. Now let's get to the why. What's the grand, almost existential mission that's fueling all of these companies that, on the surface, might seem totally separate?
At the end of the day, his mission is really all about preservation. He sees consciousness, life as we know it, as this incredibly rare and fragile phenomenon. So for him, becoming a multiplanetary species isn't just some cool sci-fi idea. He genuinely sees it as a necessary insurance policy against what are called great filters, things like a giant asteroid impact or even us destroying ourselves, that could snuff out that candle for good.
And you have to remember, this mission has always been on a knife's edge. I mean, it's so easy to forget just how close he came to total, complete failure. In that final week of December 2008, both SpaceX and Tesla were literally hours away from going bankrupt. He'd poured every last cent he had into them. It was a last-minute NASA contract and a truly desperate financing round that saved both companies right before Christmas.
And this fear of extinction in a future dominated by something new, leads us straight to Neuralink. See, Musk is completely convinced that a digital superintelligence is inevitable. It's coming. So his solution isn't to try and stop it, but to make sure that we humans can actually keep up. He wants to solve our biggest bottleneck, the super slow input/output speed of our own brains. In his view, this isn't just about curing things like blindness. He thinks it could eventually allow us to merge with AI, to seriously augment our own senses and intelligence just to survive.
So that brings us to what Musk believes is the single biggest variable in our future: artificial intelligence. It's become a central focus of his work now, and he absolutely sees it as a double-edged sword. It represents both humanity's greatest promise and its most profound peril.
Through his new company, xAI, he's developing AI models that are showing some pretty startling capabilities. Just look at this chart. It shows the performance of his Grok 4 model on a benchmark exam that is so incredibly difficult, previous AIs were barely getting single-digit scores on it. And it's not just trivia. It combines advanced math, chemistry, and humanities to test for real, actual reasoning.
80%. Think about that. Even though he puts the odds of AI-driven annihilation at a pretty sobering 10 to 20%, he still gives an 80% chance for a positive, even great outcome. So,
what does he think is the key to tipping those skills toward survival? For him, it boils down to one thing: programming AI with what he calls a rigorous adherence to truth, no matter what, regardless of any political sensitivities. Now, this is fascinating. This table kind of reveals the evolution in their strategy. They aren't just trying to build a bigger and bigger AI brain. No, they're creating what you could call an AI study group. The latest version, Grok 4 Heavy, actually uses multiple specialized AI agents. Each one tackles the problem, they debate their findings with each other, and then they collaborate to produce a final, much more robust answer.
So, okay, how does this entire worldview translate into action on the ground? Let's take a look at how Musk applies these same principles in some of today's most heated arenas. We're talking geopolitics, government spending, and yep, the culture wars.
Right, so Musk frames a lot of his recent political engagement as a direct battle against what he calls the woke mind virus. In his view, and he says this is a core reason he bought X, which was formerly Twitter, this ideology is anti-meritocratic, it suppresses free and open discussion, and ultimately, he considers it a threat to civilization itself.
When it comes to incredibly complex geopolitical conflicts, like the one in Gaza, he proposes this pretty unique strategy. He calls it conspicuous acts of kindness. He argues that a purely military response is just flawed. His logic is this: for every single enemy you kill, you risk creating several more who are now motivated purely by revenge. So he contends that the most effective long-term strategy actually involves highly visible, undeniable acts of humanitarian aid.
And then you've got the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE for short. He claims this initiative is tackling what he calls a trillion-dollar scam of pure waste and fraud in government. So far, the team has targeted things like Social Security payments going out to millions of deceased people, and billions in completely untraceable payments sent out with no description code at all.
So at the end of the day, when you put all this together, when you synthesize these interviews, what you get is a remarkably coherent, though definitely controversial worldview. You can draw a direct line from his first principles thinking to his mission to save humanity, and all the way to this ideological war he believes he's fighting for civilization's future, which leaves us with one final, unavoidable question. Is this whole thing a blueprint for a better future designed by a truly unique mind? Or is it a cautionary tale about the immense power of a single, unshakable vision?